Hi guys, it's Reagan and welcome back to another video. Today's video I'm so excited about because it is my September TBR. And for me personally, September 1st really marks the beginning of fall, and I am a huge seasonal reader, and fall tends to be just one of my favorite times of year for reading. Just filling my time with spooky, scary, atmospheric reads, I relish in it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into my September TBR. First book that is at the very tip top of my TBR, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are reading it as well, is Babel by R.F. Kuang. I love R.F. Kuang's writing. I'm obsessed with the Poppy War series, so when I saw she was coming out with a dark academia fantasy story, I knew I needed to read it right away. I was counting down the days till this arrived on my doorstep, and it is finally here. I can't wait to read it, also do a reading vlog for it. I truly feel like I'm going to love this so much. The story opens in 1828 in England, and we follow our main character Robin after he is orphaned. He's sort of snatched up by a group of individuals, and from there he's sort of trained in all different types of academia throughout his entire life, so that one day he could join a very prestigious and secretive Royal Institute of Translation. The Tower and its students are the world's center for translation and, more importantly, magic and power. Robin quickly realizes that this group has been used by the British Empire for generations to basically hold their power across the entire globe. As Robin becomes more indoctrinated in this sort of educational institution, he also begins to realize that he might actually be complicit in helping Britain and their colonization pursuits. So Robin is kind of stuck between this sort of academic setting and this desire for rebellion. This book honestly sounds incredible. I've heard such amazing things from literally everyone who's picked this book up. I feel like this is going to have a fantastic sort of academic setting, but also highly critical of the institution itself, and I truly cannot wait to dive in. The next book I would like to pick up is a recent sci-fi pickup for me. I feel like ever since I added it to my shelf, it's been sort of staring me down, literally, when you see the cover, and that is the Trader Moreau Cormorants. This is actually another story centering on colonization, but this time in space. There's essentially this all-powerful empire that has taken over this island, erasing their culture, their history, and outlawing any sort of reference to it. Our main character Baru has decided to be patient in their pursuit of revenge, and they basically have enrolled to become part of like the empire's most elite sort of academy, and they're kind of biding their time for destruction. And again, this book just sounds incredible. This is the first book to a series. I've again heard amazing things about it. I'm really hoping this is intense and also highly political, and I truly feel like it's going to deliver on all counts. This book on my list is a bit of a lighter read. I'm still kind of craving some historical romance, so I thought this would be a perfect book to pick up, and that is 10,000 Stitches by Olivia Atwater. I read Half a Soul by this author earlier on this year and adored it. It's basically Regency romance with a dash of fantasy. Adorable, cute, heart-wrenching romances with really fun, fantastical fairy twists. Absolute winning combination, if you ask me. This series, like many romance series, follows a new main character, but kind of exists within the same world and kind of has references to other books, but it does mean that you can kind of read them in any order that you prefer. This book follows her main character, Effie, and she has most inconveniently fallen in love with a very dashing gentleman named Mr. Benedict Ashbrook. There is a significant issue. Effie is a housemaid, and housemaids do not marry very wealthy gentlemen. Effie appears to be out of luck until she accidentally stumbles into the land of the Fae and meets up with a very eager Lord Blackthorn, who's kind of like a bumbling, very ill-prepared fairy godmother, and he is determined to help her win his heart. And the fairy bargain that our main character makes is that she must sew 10,000 stitches into Lord Blackthorn's favorite jacket. Now she has 100 days to not only convince the love of her life to love her back, but also make all of those stitches occur as well. This honestly sounds delightful, adorable, all the adjectives. I flew through the first one. I think I read it in like less than a day. I feel like this will be a perfect palate cleanser book that will also just kind of put a smile on my face. The next book that's on my TBR is The Wolf and the Woodsman by Ava Reed. This, based on the synopsis, appears to be a very dark and lyrical fantasy tale, which tend to always be my favorite. I love any type of mythology, folklore retelling, and this just sings to me. Not to mention, this is also sold as written in the same vein as The Bear and the Nightingale and Spinning Silver, which are two of my all-time favorite reads, so I do have very high expectations going into this book. This story is inspired by Hungarian history and Jewish mythology and follows our main character, Eveke, and she lives in a very small village where everyone has powers but her. Due to her lack of magic, the villagers blame her for her corrupted bloodline and kind of view her as an outcast. And at the beginning of the story, when the evil king is requiring a blood sacrifice of a pagan woman, her village gives her up as this sacrifice. At the beginning of this book, she is being transported to this evil empire, but when monsters attack our main character's Aveke's transport, she is left alone with only one single surviving woodsman, a one-eye captain who is very mysterious. Now they have to work together to survive and kind of make it through this forest, and I truly cannot wait to pick this book up. It seems like the perfect combination of strange and magical. I've heard excellent things about the writing style of this book, and again, Jewish mythology, say no more. I love folklore, I love mythology retellings, always. Next up, I have a few books you might recognize from my fall TBR. The first one is The Death of Jane Lawrence by Caitlin Starling. This is a gothic horror story, which I don't read a lot of horror, but when I do, I love when it's sort of a gothic reimagining. Jane Eyre really impacted me in every way, shape, and form, but this book sounds incredible. This follows our main character, Jane, and she has done the calculations, she has done the research, and she has come to the conclusion that the best way forward for her in life is to enter a marriage of convenience. This would allow her to continue all of her own individual pursuits, but also have the security and long-term safety of a marriage. She approaches a very handsome and very well-off doctor. He also agrees to her terms and stipulations. They get married with one condition: Jane must never visit his crumbling family manor in the countryside. But of course, shortly after their marriage and at the beginning of the story, Jane is left stranded in the countryside with only this crumbling family manor to find any type of salvation in. She arrives, she finds her new husband completely changed, and the story begins to unfold from there. This sounds creepy, this sounds weird. I can't wait to pick it up. Next up is the second book in a series I have been planning to read for months and just have not gotten to, and that is The Bone Shard Emperor by Andrea Stewart. I have no idea why I have not read this book. I have simply no excuses. So hopefully in the month of September, I will finally be getting to it. But this is book 2 to a fantastic new fantasy series I have been enjoying so much. This is a multi-POV fantasy tale with a really interesting magic system that is very intricately put together. Essentially, in this world, individuals can use bone shards to make puppets come to life. The skill sets of these different animated figures vary greatly. They can literally run whole departments in the government to just be like simple little servants that run around and have very simple rules that they have to live by. But that is structurally how the magic works, and also how the very ruthless emperor was able to maintain power for so long. In book 1, there is a lot of stirrings of rebellion, and we follow a variety of characters ranging from the emperor's daughter, who's trying to investigate and understand her father's dark magic for herself, to a smuggler and other people involved in the rebellion. Book 1 really opened the door to this world. I enjoyed the writing and the magic quite a bit, so I'm excited to see how it continues to expand in the next installment. And then next up is one of my most anticipated releases of the year. I'm so excited to have it in my hands, and I feel like based on many of your comments, I did see that it might be better to read while it's still a little warm outside. Luckily, even though September might be technically a fall-ish month, it's still going to be rather hot in Texas. And the book I'm talking about is The Daughter of Dr Moreau by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This is Silvia Moreno Garcia's newest release. I cannot wait to read it. I truly have never been disappointed by any of her books. Her writing style, her stories, just everything about what she does, I love so much. This is set to be a lush and dreamy reimagining of the island of Dr. Moreau, set against the backdrop of 19th century Mexico. This story is multi-POV, and we're following a variety of characters mostly living on the island of Dr. Moreau. The first is the daughter of Dr. Moreau, who has been raised in isolation on this very rich estate, kind of ignorant to any type of politics that are occurring on the Yucatan Peninsula. And she also doesn't really know too much about her father's mysteries as well. We have a character named Montgomery, who is the assistant to Dr. Moreau. He himself also has a tragic past and a difficulty with alcohol. And of course, we have the hybrids and the experiments that Dr. Moreau has created on this island, and they of course exist quite fundamentally within the space too. And then lastly, we have a young man who has just traveled to this island at the beginning of this book. He is the young son of one of Dr. Moreau's patrons, and he kind of upsets the very precarious balance that occurs in this place. I can't wait to pick this book up. I feel like it's going to be dazzling. I feel like the writing style is going to be incredible. I also like that this has a sci-fi element to it with the sort of experimentation side, and I'm excited to see how Silvia Moreno Garcia kind of explores that aspect. So I can't wait to read this. I feel like it's also going to be a quick read, and I feel like I'm also gonna love it. Next is another magic dark academia read because I think they're so fun, and this is also the best time of year to pick them up in my opinion. That book is The Unkindness of Magicians. This is like a dark academia magic thriller story, which just sounds so cool to me. The story is set in the private world of New York City's most powerful and rich magicians. In this secret society, families have been kind of battling for generations for magical supremacy, and there's very often duels to kind of be at the head of this institution. At the beginning of this book, there are kind of two central characters within this group. The first is the young child of a very powerful family who doesn't seem quite ready to enter a duel for themselves. And then lastly, there is this unknown magician, kind of known as an upstart, who has no clear family connections at all, but she might seemingly be the most powerful around them. And so begins a duel, so begins characters who have a score to settle. And again, this is said to be like a bit of a thriller story as well, so I feel like it's going to read super quickly. I love pretentious characters. I love pretentious characters with magic, so this seems like a recipe for success. Next is the first book in a new fantasy series I have been dying to check out, and that is The Mask of Mirrors by M.A. Carrick. I've read so many comments from you guys saying that I would really enjoy the series. I have this and the second book as well, so if I do love this, I can marathon. That is an option. And the tagline of this book is "Fortune favors the bold and magic favors the liars." Ooh. And this follows our main character, Ren, and she is a con artist. And at the beginning of this book, she has arrived at the sparkling city of Nazera. She has arrived here with one goal, and that is to trick her way into as many noble houses as possible, secure her fortune and her sister's future. But her masquerade is just one of many, and as corrupt nightmare magic begins to weave through the city itself, poisonous feuds of its nobility and the shadowy dangers of its underbelly begin to tangle, with Ren at the heart of it. This sounds so good. I love a thief story. I love any type of character trying to break into places, steal a bunch of money, and sneak out into the night. I also love that this seems to deal with magic centering on dreams and nightmares. I think that is such a cool concept. I can't wait to pick this book up. I hope it's entrancing. I hope it's dark. I also hope there's a bit of romance, but we shall see. Next is a literary fiction option that I have just been dying to read. I've just run into so many people IRL who have all picked this book up and loved it, so it's just kind of skyrocketed back at the top of my TBR, and that is Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead. This is a historical fiction style story. Reading over the synopsis of this book, this seems to have a lot of trappings I love so much. First off, it takes place over a rather large swath of time and also brings together two unlikely characters through an interesting connection and kind of seeing their lives bleed into one another. Always a device I love so much in novels. Great Circle centers two main characters. The first is Marion, who is a very illustrious and famous female pilot who has had an incredible career as a pilot throughout her entire life and adulthood. And then we also follow Hadley, who is hired 100 years later to play the part of Marion in a movie. And what I hear is particularly interesting about the story is the blending of points of views, particularly as Hadley begins to immerse herself in Marion's character. Parallel experiences in the hunger for self-determination begin to unfold in vastly different places, industries, time periods, but the overall connection between these two characters is apparently palpable. I hear this book is so good. I also love that it centers like flight, and one of our main characters is a pilot. I'm really curious to see what I think about this book. I feel like I'm gonna personally love it, but only one way to find out. And the last book that's on my TBR might be a surprise, might not be. It's been on many TBRs throughout this year, and that is The Shadow Rising by Robert Jordan. I have been like 100 pages into this book for months. I definitely put it aside. I have not gotten to it in the past couple months. I took a bit of a break. But I finally feel ready to continue on with the Wheel of Time series, and I'm looking forward to reading or listening more of the audiobook this month, particularly because I am right back into playing video games once more, and I feel like this will be perfect to accompany my video game playing throughout the fall-winter season. I'm hoping I finish it this month, if not make a good chunk of the way through, but nevertheless, I'm back on the Wheel of Time train. I'll let you know how much I like this book or not. Alrighty guys, that is my September TBR. Please let me know down below some books you hope to get to this month, as I would love to know, and I will see you soon with another video soon. Goodbye!